Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the 12-month video game repair challenge. If this is your first time here, let me give you a little recap. I'm challenging myself to fix everything I currently have, and there's a lot of it. I've had stuff saved for several years in storage, but not enough to complete this challenge, so I'll need to buy new stuff at some point. Also, here's some rules that I've set out for myself. First off, no debt. I start with $0 and I need to repair and sell items that I already have to make enough money to buy new parts and new items to fix. The goal is $10,000 in sales by the time I'm done too. Number 2 is I have a maximum of 7 hours a week to do any testing and repairs. Number 3 is there's no cost for supplies and tools I already own. And number 4 is to share everything. One summary video each month until the 12 months are done. We're coming into this month with $108.26 saved from last month's sales, so I'm going to change it up a bit and start with some of the stuff that's sold over the last month first. First item sold of the month, an original Duke Xbox controller with a new cable for $29.97. Awesome. Alright, just sold another green controller for $29.97. This one has replacement thumbsticks and a swapped out cord from another controller. And it also has a small little crack on the inside of the housing right here, but it doesn't seem to be too bad. You can't feel it on the outside, so I don't think it'll impede anything if you're playing or whatnot. But happy to have another one sold. Just got another couple sales. Sold the dark blue Sega Game Gear for $149.97. And another repaired controller with another new cable for $29.97. Awesome. I'm going to have to work on more of these now. Just sold another item, this NES Tecmo Super Bowl cartridge for $34.97. Sold another controller that had replacement thumbsticks and a replacement cord for $29.97. I'd like to finish up the original Xbox controllers from the last videos since I only have a few of those left. First up was one that had a bad right trigger. Well, the trigger wasn't actually bad once I looked into it. Turns out the pads the trigger was connected to were though. They were just missing from the board completely. It's possible they came off when I desoldered these pins, but I didn't notice any extra pads when I was done. So I scraped away the top of the remaining traces that were well attached to the board yet. Then made some patch parts with some component legs and soldered them in place with the use of some extra flux to make sure that they would adhere well. I tested the pins and the other surrounding traces with a multimeter to make sure they didn't have any crossed connections, and I also wanted to make sure they were attached to the proper pads too. Everything tested great, and I added a little bit of green nail polish to the top of these patches to protect them. I really need to get some real solder masks someday. Next up was the Duke controller with cross connections and random other issues from the last video. I ultimately decided to scrap this board and use its parts to fix others. Upon inspection of the board, it just had too many issues and I didn't believe it would work long term even if these were fixed properly. I had already patched one pad and a trace on the left thumbstick and was noticing more broken traces on the board. The board seemed to be shedding traces from multiple locations once I started looking at it really close too, and that tells me that this would continue to happen more and more as time went on. Over time, with handling and vibrations, I worried that there would be more and more, so this one sadly is scrapped. I messed around and tested the other controllers that won't connect at all to see if I could find some of the reason why they wouldn't work and came back empty-handed. I got excited for a moment since I noticed that there was some debris on this blue controller's wire harness and thought that it might be causing a bridge between two connections. I decided to clean all the remaining controllers as best as possible and do one final test to see if that would help. The last few controllers. So these two tested really good. No issues whatsoever after replacing the cord, or I believe this one had a bad right trigger. So this one's all good, this one's all good. These, however, I did some experiments on the non-connecting ones. I had one extra replacement cord. I wanted to try it with this one. And then I also did some cleaning on these just to see on the plugins, as well as other testing on the boards, some other cleaning. Make sure these were as best as they possibly could be going into these, and they still do not connect whatsoever. This one turned out it was because it had a bad cord, and I just chopped it off. So I can just replace it with this one. When I plugged this one in, interestingly enough, I started smelling burning electronics, so I'm guessing that's probably not a good idea. Not something that's good with this one. I didn't notice any other problems with it whatsoever when I was working on it, but there it is. So I don't really know what to do with the non-connecting ones. Maybe it's a capacitor issue. I'm not 100% sure. I would need to test remove them and test them. I don't have any more good circuit boards to use for this one. And I don't know, maybe it is the cords that are bad with these, but I did a swap on this one to check that, and it's just very bizarre, the no connection whatsoever. But I'll be able to fix one more, because this one does connect and it does work, but just didn't have a good cord. So, and I didn't have enough thumbsticks, but I got my thumbsticks in. I'll probably be able to use the thumbsticks from this one anyway in order to replace it to this one. Probably be able to fix one more out of this batch here, but two more done, which is good. These, I have no idea what to do with. Swap the cord on this one and it works great. I grabbed out a board that I had scrapped from the first batch of fixed controllers that had the same no connection issues and took the caps out of it to test it. This took a bit of time since I'm not as familiar with testing capacitors, but all of them tested fine. To finally finish out this batch of controllers, the only things I can come up with for why these don't connect is either some unseen board problem like a broken trace, or the chips are just bad on them. If any of you have any other tips or ideas as to why these test bad, please leave a comment down below on what else I can check to attempt to fix them. But moving on. Since I sold the other blue Game Gear early in the month, I figured I should replace it. I took the power and sound boards out of another black Game Gear that I had finished a while ago to save some time too. This black one unfortunately has a bad screen and it will need to be fully replaced with an upgraded version. So might as well use some of the parts out of it since it doesn't need them currently anyway. That's one of the main problems with fixing Game Gears that most people don't know. Sometimes you can't tell if the screen is bad until the caps are replaced. It's pretty common to have missing pixels or other random issues on them, and it really sucks to get to the end of a repair only to find that out. But thankfully that wasn't the case with this blue one. Because I swapped in the power and the sound boards to test it out, I was able to see the screen didn't have any issues besides the odd split screen effect caused by bad caps on the motherboard. All in all, I'm pretty happy how this one turned out in the end. Nice and clean, almost brand new even. Speaking of brand new, if you need any circuit boards printed or assembled, you should check out PCBWay, which is today's video sponsor. PCBWay.com is a printed circuit board manufacturer that provides a wide variety of options for prototyping and assembly. Speaking of assembly, PCBWay has many different options for it too. Most interesting to me is the Flex PCB assembly services, but they have a formalized process that is committed to quality for even the smallest orders too. Ordering and getting estimates for your orders are easy as well. When you click on the instant quote button, all the different PCB and assembly options are displayed right away. Just select the specifications you'd like in your project, and it gives you quotes immediately. With over 50,000 positive reviews, consider choosing PCBWay for your next prototyping assembly needs. I would like to thank PCBWay for sponsoring today's video, and be sure to check out PCBWay.com for all your project's needs. Now back to the fixes. By the way, why has no one told me they make surface mounted cap kits for Sega Game Gears? I found this browsing on eBay and had to pick one up to check it out. It came all the way from France and looks like it would make the job so much easier, at least in theory. I still have about 4 or 5 of the standard through-hole cap kits left to use up, but I bought this one as a test for only 11 bucks. I also happen to have about the same number of Game Gears that need to be fixed, so it works out perfectly. I also just happened to find out the new Benven Game Gear screen kits fit perfectly with surface-mounted cap kits too. So I picked up one of his new kits to use in an upcoming build in case the screen has missing pixels after swapping out the caps. This will be a great way to still be able to use a Game Gear that has unfixable screen issues and also get to check out the new screen kit too. If you don't know who Benven is, you should really go check out his website if you like upgrading old handhelds. I've purchased several of his screen kits before and they have all worked great. I'm not sponsored by him or anything, I just really like the mods he makes. But I went through my collection of misfit toys and found another black Game Gear that thankfully didn't have any other screen issues. I had to test to see if the surface mounted caps make for a quicker install. This one had zero sound and the standard lack of picture issues. At first I thought maybe the speaker had gone bad since there wasn't any sound, period. But once I saw the soundboard and the leaky caps, it all made sense why it wasn't working right. I was eager to try out the new caps and made quick work of the old caps by desoldering all of them from the main board. A task I've done many a time before, but not with as much excitement. In my excitement, I had failed to notice that the pad for C47 had become a bit loose from the board, and as I was cleaning, I ended up bending it further away from its resting place. Thankfully, by some miracle, it didn't break off. which wouldn't have been a huge issue, but it would have just required more time to fix. Every time I have this happen, I always think of the old saying, haste makes waste. Even though this isn't trash, I will be wasting some of my precious repair time fixing this mistake. Due to this, I only have a vague notion if the surface mounted caps are faster to install, but I'll try it again and let you know when I don't have other issues to fix as well. I can say that it did seem faster. The only cap that gave me some issues was C68 in the upper left corner, and that's only because it has a tight fit next to the power connection there. On to fixing the lifted pad though. With the small tweezers, I was able to pull on the end of the pad and unfurl it back to its flat position. From there, I gently cleaned it with some IPA since it had some corrosion on it, which I'm sure was at least partially to blame for the failure in the first place. I then added some flux to the pads and tinned them with some new solder to prepare them for the new cap. I installed the side that was still attached to the board first, and then used my tweezers again to hold onto the other side that was not while touching it with some solder. Once it was tacked down, I came back with some more solder and tested the connections to make sure they would not only hold, but were also properly connected too. The connections were solid, but I just didn't feel right leaving it hanging without having it connected somehow to the board. So I used the age-old fix for electronics repair. Hot glue. Yeah, I know it's not the perfect solution, but there's a reason why it works so well. It's non-conductive and really attaches itself to the board well since it fills into the nooks and crannies. This was more than solid when I was done, and I was happy with how everything looked too. I really like how clean the surface mounted caps look versus the through-hole kits too. Once I use up my old kits, I'm probably going to exclusively buy surface mounted now. No need to worry about the placement of the caps, or the direction, or even the polarity for that matter. It really removes a lot of the guesswork and seems to streamline the whole installation. This unit worked great once I was done, just needed some additional cleaning to make it pop. The sound and picture quality was much better, and I listed it online for $129.97 and moved on to the next project. Next up was another handheld that I inadvertently purchased broken. This pink DS Lite was in a lot of other stuff that I was bidding on, and I thought it was working when bidding. When I won the auction and finally got it, I found out the top screen was damaged, which needs to be replaced, and it has some corrosion on the pins in the back. Not a huge deal since I only ended up spending about 21 bucks for the unit. I found a replacement top screen online for $15.99 and got to work on the swap. I have the full version of the swap posted on the channel, but I'll do a quick overview for those of you who haven't seen that video yet. Nintendo DS's are very compact handhelds that I'm convinced are designed to cater to people with smaller hands. Thus, the insides are smaller and much more compact as well. So in my case, fixing one of these is challenging to say the least. The parts are very small and delicate, and I'm always in fear that I'm going to be damaging something unknowingly by accident. To get this fixed, you have to take apart the entire unit, starting at the bottom and working all the way up to the top screen housing. It's a long road to swap out one part, and with everything being so small, it made it even more difficult. Getting the white and black wires removed from the lower board with the tweezers makes things a bit easier, and I would highly recommend them if you have a similar problem. The ribbon cable for the screen is my main source of frustration though. It's so easy to remove, so why is it so difficult to put back? But I'll get into that in a minute. I first finished the removal of the broken screen and started adding the speakers and front screen protector onto the new one. Pretty easy stuff even though everything is small. Using tweezers really does help. But now the problem. Getting the new ribbon cable through the hinge hole. The new one is a little more rigid and hasn't been in a bent position for a long while where it's biased towards one direction. Due to this, and probably my large fingers, it's very difficult to roll up and shove it through this housing hole. It's pretty sad, but I literally worked on this for probably close to an hour. Get it rolled up, and it unwinds. Get it into the end of the hole, and it's not wound tight enough. Get it rolled tight on one end, and the other end unrolls. Saying this was frustrating can't begin to sum up the feelings I had at this moment. I finally got it in place and had to get up and walk around for a bit to relax afterwards. This is exactly why I rarely work on these. But I was able to come back fresh and finish the reassembly. Before I buttoned up the housing, I cleaned out the cartridge slot with some small tools to scrape out the corrosion, followed by Q-tips soaked in IPA. This took a while too, but it worked great. I had originally planned to remove the cartridge shielding so I could access the pins better, but I'm glad I didn't have to do that since the Q-tips worked so well. Once everything was finished, I realized at some point I had lost one of the pink screw hole covers. I have no idea where this went, but after reviewing my footage, I know when it was lost at least. It's just gone, never to be seen again. But I did one final cleaning and listed the unit along with the charger and a travel case for sale in my eBay store. If you're interested, I have my store linked in the description below and a coupon code for 5% off anything available in my store for my YouTube subscribers. I hope you've been able to learn something new in these videos, and I also hope I've been able to earn your subscription. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch my videos and comment on them as well. Thanks again for your support. Now on to some more fixes. I call this story the original PS1 console and the extremely common problem of the open button sticking. I have another video on my channel explaining exactly how to do this as well, but it's a pretty simple process. Just remove the cover, then clean and sand the button edges until they start moving freely again. Pretty simple fix, but I wanted to blow out some of the dust inside of the unit and took it outside to do exactly that. Once it was blown out, it looked a lot better and was working well too. I bundled this unit with all of its cords, a memory card, and a controller and ended up selling it right away for $59.97. The next PS1 didn't work so well though. Actually, it didn't turn on at all. I wanted to investigate to see if there was an obvious issue with the power supply, but besides it being very dirty, I didn't see anything that was jumping out at me. I removed it and did some heavy cleaning with IPA and a toothbrush so I could better see the board and its traces. The cleaning helped and really removed a lot of whatever this is, but I tested several possible points of failure. The main power connector was one spot, the fuse was another. Also, the reset button and power switch were tested too, and all of them just seem fine. The caps aren't bulging, and I don't see any corrosion either, so I'm not sure what could be wrong with this one. I was hoping that maybe it just needed some cleaning, but I tested it again, still no power. I normally don't like to work on power supply boards and opted to buy a used replacement. I found one on eBay for $11.99, and it fit this exact model of PS1. It was also delivered lightning fast. I got it in place and went to test it out. All right, moment of truth, new power supply. Ah, look at that. Nice. Awesome. Now I just got to test everything else on it. So the controller ports work, the memory ports work, but this just happened. Yeah. Unfortunately, this unit has some other problems, so I'll come back to it later since I believe I have more PS1s buried that need fixing. But for now, the power issue is fixed at least. Next up on our repair journey is Sega Genesis consoles. I have 3 of these and a controller that I'm thinking just needs some deep cleaning. They are all in really rough shape, and I'm pretty sure I picked them up at a barn sale a few years ago, but I can't remember exactly. I have 2 Model 1s and 1 Model 2 that also has a 3/4 motherboard in it. These all have similar issues too. They are all pretty dirty inside and out and have some bits of corrosion on the cartridge slots. I use the same method for each of them. Take them apart, blow them out, clean them with IPA. A good deep clean of the boards really seems to help in many situations, and this situation was no exception. I like to use a toothbrush to scrub the cartridge slots, and that will normally remove about 90% of the corrosion and other issues. The other 10% can be taken care of with some tweezers, followed up by some more scrubbing with the toothbrush. I got a lot of debris out of each of these consoles, and even though some spots of the shielding were pretty rusty, they all seem to work well during testing. I just had a few minor issues to take care of after cleaning the insides, like the controller ports being dirty. I forgot to clean these on my first pass, and it really was just the same process of using IPA and some Q-tips to remove any and all dirt and debris from the pins. Same went for the controller. The B button was sticky and wasn't very responsive. A little IPA and some scrubbing time later, it worked great again. I cleaned the outsides of the consoles and made one bundle for the Model 2 that I listed on eBay for about 65 bucks. I'll need to purchase some hookups for the others before listing them since I only have the power packs and no extra AV cords for them. So whenever I order another batch of parts, I'll be sure to pick some up to complete the sets. Speaking of extra parts, I got in more from an order that I placed mid-month with XYAB. I picked up some Wavebird controller battery doors in both colors, the silver and the gray, some replacement PS3 controller batteries, some more Xbox thumbstick ends and components, an N64 power pack and AV cable set in preparation for fixing one of those in the future, a few more quick disconnect ends for Xbox controllers, and some replacement screw covers for PS2 consoles. In total, I spent another $79.90 including shipping on these new parts, and unfortunately I didn't end up using most of the controller parts, but that's okay. I'll save them for future fixes. To continue with the theme of fixing consoles, let's move on to some Xbox units. First off, we have a Xbox with a sticky drive, and this one happens to have a kind of loose AV connection as well. When you hit the button to release it, the disk drive doesn't always work. And I know sometimes what you can do once this stops here is push up on the DVD drive as it's coming out, and voila, there it is. So this one travels back no problem, it just won't pop out, it sticks. So my guess is the rubber band inside that drive is bad. So we're gonna take that out and replace it. But the other thing I wanted to show you is I'm gonna wiggle the AV cable. It kind of does this kind of thing, where it just has random little lines and whatnot if it's not perfectly seated. So I want to take a look at that, see if there's something that may be loose inside the console. This one, it's seated okay, but it does have a little bit of play. So we're gonna go take a look and see if we can fix it. Since this one has more issues besides the disk drive sticking, I'm going to open it up and take a look inside to make sure nothing else is wrong with the AV connection. Opening these units is a longer process than it really needs to be, honestly, since all 6 of the screws are hidden. I hate wrecking the labels, but I haven't found a better way to remove the screws. And please, if you ever do this to your own units, don't throw away the feet. There's so many people that throw them away when they can just glue them back in place. If you really don't want to put them back on, then buy the feet with the holes in them and replace the old ones. Please, I beg of you. But you do need a special Torx screwdriver set to remove these case screws. Specifically a T20 bit for the bottoms, and the inside requires mainly T10 bits for the top. But once everything is out, you get access to the disk drive, which can be opened with a smaller Phillips bit instead. There are 4 screws on this housing, and once that is removed, now you can get to the guts of the drive. I'll clean the inside quick to remove all the dust, but there's a small white override lever in the front that will get the drive to eject. This will give you access to the rubber band on the drive so you can replace it. See how it moves kind of wonky and not really smooth? That's because it's stretched out and needs to be replaced. This is most likely causing the issues with the drive not opening. Let me show you what it looks like when it's removed versus the new one. The old one has a very egg-shaped look and the new one is round. Now I've seen people boil these old ones so they can go back to being round, but just do yourself a favor and buy a new one. I got a bag of 10 of these for $7 last month. It's a really cheap fix, even if you have to buy 10 of them. To install them, you just loop your new one around the gears and you're done. It's probably one of the easiest fixes you can do, honestly. And look how the gear wheels move now. Nice and smooth. When you're done installing it, manually push the white lever back in place to bring the laser eye assembly back to its closed position. Then reassemble your Xbox in reverse order and you should be good. But did you know that there's even an easier way to swap these out? Instead of opening up your Xbox and going through all that hassle, you can just manually pop the front drive out with a paper clip. Now you'll probably need a curved pair of tweezers for this, but you can go in through the front to dig out the old drive band. Then just reattach it in the same way. You just need to wiggle it a bit to drop it into place, then pull it on the one side to get it around the second gear pulley. And you're done. And you're welcome. Insanely easy fix. But there's another advantage to opening up your Xbox, and that is removing or replacing your clock capacitor. I checked the first Xbox I opened and I'm happy I did. The other caps all look to be in good shape yet, but the clock cap, which is this one right here, has failed and is already leaking onto the motherboard. This needs to be removed and cleaned up immediately, otherwise it can do a lot of additional damage to the surrounding electronics. I did some research about clock caps after removing this one, and I guess I never realized how pervasive of a problem this really is. Pretty much every one of these caps will fail at some point, and it may or may not cause lasting damage to the console. I'll probably make a separate video about this in the future, but basically none of these clock caps are needed. They are there in the event that your Xbox is unplugged so it can save your clock settings for about a half hour until it's plugged back in again. They serve no other purpose besides that and will not affect the use of your console except for clicking through the clock settings menu that pops up when it first boots. For this console, I cleaned the surrounding area and was able to bend the cap gently back and forth until it snapped off from its base. I found out after that one of the legs wasn't even attached anymore because it was so badly corroded, and that probably made this process of removal even easier. I swapped out a few other rubber bands in consoles that had similar problems, but unfortunately those weren't fixed when I did so. For example, this one. Alright, I replaced the rubber band in this one, but this just keeps happening. It just keeps opening up randomly, not sure why. I'll probably have to look into the disk drive a little bit more for this one to see why it just keeps popping out. Why it keeps popping out could be related to the clock capacitor. Turns out the bottom side of the motherboard by the location of the clock cap controls the opening and closing of the disk drive too. If the traces are corroded from a failed clock cap, this could be causing that issue with the disk drive. The disk drive itself could also be to blame, but I guess I'll find out next month because I ran out of time to investigate it further since I went down a bit of a rabbit hole researching the possible problems of clock capacitors. So I'll hopefully get this guy cracked open next month so we can all see why this is having this issue and how it can get fixed. But on to some cleaning. The first Xbox console was really dirty and needed a deep cleaning. I spent a lot of time working on it and I think it looks pretty good now considering. Here are the before shots. Pretty dirty. And here's the after. Pretty crazy, hey? And yes, before people start leaving comments down below saying it's just a replacement unit, I'll show you the bottom of the serial number as proof that it isn't. This is actually really hard to do with one hand, by the way. It still has some scuffs and deeper scratches on the top, but looks a lot better than it did. I listed this one in a bundle for about $100 and one other one with a replaced drive band that was in better shape for about $110. These were the last few items I was able to clean up and fix this month, so let me show you the rest of what's sold and jump into the final numbers since this video is getting a little long. Just sold 2 more items. Super Mario Bros. Deluxe for Game Boy Color for $34.97, and another blue controller with replaced thumbsticks and a replaced cord for $29.97. Just sold another Game Gear that's recapped with a new front, and I always include these plastic pieces on there just to make sure that there's no scratching with handling or anything like that, and the new owner can rip it off when they get it. But this one sold for $150 again, so awesome. All right, last item sold of the month is another blue Xbox controller for $29.97. I also picked up a new solder mat for only 19 cents. I had an Amazon gift card and it was on sale, so win-win there. We'll see how well the black looks in future videos. I still didn't get to use the full time this month, but I feel like I got a lot accomplished. Lots of odds and ends done. I'm going to dig into the Xbox consoles a bit more next month and see what the specific issues are with the ones that continue to have drive problems. But I got a lot of stuff repaired, so I'm pretty happy about that, and my numbers are finally looking a little bit better too. Thanks again for watching, and if you've made it this far, please consider subscribing because there's more content to come. We'll see you next fix.